It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is four-term Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She was a 2020 presidential candidate, and she is now a New York Times best-selling author. Tulsi Gabbard is a veteran of 3 deployments to war zones in the Middle East and Africa. She has served in uniform for more than 2 decades, is currently a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, and also leads a nonprofit organization, We Must Protect. Tulsi Gabbard was first elected to office in Hawaii, the Hawaii State House of Representatives, when she was a mere 21 years old. Due to the attacks of 9/11, she enlisted in the Army National Guard, and then in 2004, she gave up an easy re-election campaign and volunteered to deploy to Iraq with the 29th Brigade Combat Team, where she served in a medical unit. After returning in 2006, Tulsi Gabbard worked in the U.S. Senate as a legislative aide to the senator from Hawaii, who was chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. She then actually volunteered for a second Middle East deployment as a platoon leader. Having experienced firsthand the true costs of war, Tulsi Gabbard ran for Congress at the age of 31 as a Democrat, vowing to honor the lives and sacrifice of her brothers and sisters in uniform. She prevailed in a difficult election and went on to serve in Congress for 8 years as a member of the Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, and the Foreign Affairs Committees. She decided to forego a run for re-election to Congress in 2020, running for president at that time as a Democrat. In October of 2022, Tulsi Gabbard announced that she was leaving the Democratic Party. She has decided to put country before party and now approaches every issue, domestic and foreign, based on ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. Tulsi Gabbard's first book, For Love of Country, Leave the Democratic Party Behind, was released in April, and just last week it hit number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. I am really honored to have former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard as a guest on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's great to be here to join you. Thank you.
Very much appreciate your being here. I think this is a good sign. I was so impressed with your book. I went to the local Barnes & Noble to buy a copy for my daughter, and they were out. They were back ordered. So I think that's probably a very good sign. I know I was very proud of my first book, which actually was also a New York Times bestselling author, but this is a great experience. Folks, this is a great book. It essentially explains a life-changing decision. You're leaving the Democratic Party. So tell us about it.
Yeah, Roger, I wrote this book. I began writing this book after I made the decision to leave the Democratic Party, really because I started to hear from a very, very high amount of people who were reaching out and saying, gosh, I feel the same way that you do, and thank you for speaking up, and I feel politically homeless, and I'm not quite sure where I belong in American politics today. The Democrat elite who are leading the Democratic Party are undermining our freedom. They're destroying our democracy, and there are a lot of people who don't quite know. They're disillusioned with our politics of today and care about our country, but not quite sure what to do. So I wrote this book, Roger, to share my own experiences as well as my own diagnosis of what's going wrong in our country today, to be able to reach out to people and provide them with the knowledge and understanding that they're not alone and that what they're seeing and experiencing is not imaginary. And so I provide not only my personal experiences serving at the highest levels of the Democratic Party, but also the experiences that I had as a soldier, deploying overseas and experiencing the cost of war. The things that drove me to not only leave the Democratic Party, but to actively urge others to do the same, those who cherish peace and cherish freedom and who love our country, to take a stand to defend freedom and save our country at this point in time where the Democrat elite, Biden-Harris administration, are actually posing that greatest threat to our freedom and our democracy today.
You write in your book, today's Democratic Party is controlled by an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by woke ideology and racializing everything. They are a clear and present danger to the God-given freedoms enshrined in our Constitution. I couldn't agree more with that. I was once kind of a more traditional conservative Republican. I thought initially that the war in Iraq was a good idea. In retrospect, the more I learned, the more I began to doubt that that was a sound decision by the country. You have been out on the circuit. You've done some amazing interviews. You were extraordinary with Tucker Carlson, extraordinary with my friend Patrick Bet-David. This is a message that needs to get out. And you say that many people are telling you that they agree with you, that they are where you are in their thinking.
You know, there are, and it's not just, you know, there are 43% of Americans who don't affiliate with either major political party, but there are also, I almost every day, Roger, I either meet or hear from someone who says that, you know, I'm a Democrat, but I don't have anything in common with today's Democratic Party anymore, or people who've already made that decision to leave the Democratic Party and are trying to navigate their way through this election cycle. And so the call to action and some of the feedback that I've gotten from those who've read the book is, even as I write about some very serious problems and challenges that we're facing that pose a threat to our fundamental principles that make us who we are as a country, the end of the book is that issues a call to action for every American, not Democrats, Republicans, Independents, but every American, to recognize the responsibility that our founders placed in us, we the people, to defend freedom, to save our democracy, to make sure we have a government of, by, and for the people. And what I have heard from those who've read the book is that they are taking seriously the challenges that we face, but are leaving feeling hopeful at the end of the book because of that recognition that all is not lost, the damage that's been done is not irreparable, and that the way that we save our country, the way that we fix what is so broken, is when we stand up and take ownership of our responsibility and take our power seriously and hold those who are abusing their power accountable. And that's what we've got to do in this election.
You almost anticipated my next question. I just read a great piece by the great Victor Hanson Davis called The End of Everything. And I hear these draconian predictions, ironically, from both sides. Those who say if Joe Biden is reelected, it will be the end of democracy. Others who say, which I, of course, disagree with, that if Donald Trump is elected, it will be the end of democracy. You obviously don't believe that this is just rhetoric. You really do believe, as I think I do, that our constitutional freedoms really are in peril.
I do, and it's not just a matter of my opinion or your opinion, Roger. The evidence proves our position to be true and factual. When you take people's different feelings and emotions about President Biden or President Trump off the table, and you just look at the facts, because this is the first time in my lifetime, I think maybe only the second time in history, where we've had two people running for president who both have served as president and have a record that we can examine. The Democrat elite, no matter how often they say that President Trump is going to be the end of democracy as we know it, the facts and his record do not prove that to be true. Conversely, when you look at what the Biden administration is doing, how they are suppressing free speech in the name of protecting us from so-called misinformation or disinformation or hate speech, when really all they're doing is suppressing the speech of those who oppose them politically or who say things that they don't like. When you look at the weaponization of our Department of Justice to go after political opponents, foremost of which is Donald Trump, President Biden's opponent, but also everyday Americans who dare to stand up, peaceful pro-life protesters, parents who go and protest at a Board of Education meeting. These people are not committing crimes. They're exercising their right to free speech, the freedom of expression that's guaranteed in the First Amendment. The list goes on, and we don't have enough time to go through these examples, but these examples are some of the ones that I cite in my book to prove that point, because we could argue back and forth one opinion versus another, which is what our free speech protects, our ability to do. But the facts, again, prove that the Biden-Harris administration and their cabal of woke warmongers are the ones who, not in theory, but in action, are destroying our democracy and undermining our free speech. And they are trying to cloak that in their rhetoric, in distraction and deflection tactic, in accusing Donald Trump of doing that.
Very well said. Again, folks, the name of the book is For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind by Tulsi Gabbard. She has cover notes from individuals as diverse as Tucker Carlson, Pete Hegseth, who Army veteran, Bronze Star recipient with Fox News, Meghan McCain, Joe Rogan. Folks, this is a terrific book, and I strongly urge you to grab it. It really tells you the process that Tulsi Gabbard has gone through in making the decisions about how she was going to move forward to best serve her country. Look, I'm a political animal. I love politics. I have to admit to you that I didn't pay as much attention to your political career when you were a Democrat as perhaps I should have. But then I saw your debate with Kamala Harris, who was then running for president, and I thought it was one of the great pieces of political history that I had seen. Let's roll that, if we may.
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place. That impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response.
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work. And I am proud of making a decision to not just give fancy speeches or be in a legislative body and give speeches on the floor, but actually doing the work of being in the position to use the power that I had to reform a system that is badly in need of reform. That is why we created initiatives that were about reentering former offenders and getting them counseling.
The bottom line is, Senator Harris, when you were in a position to make a difference and an impact in these people's lives, you did not. And worse yet, in the case of those who were on death row, innocent people, you actually blocked evidence from being revealed that would have freed them until you were forced to do so. There is no excuse for that. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
Well, you are a brawler. There's no question about that. And the fact that you came back is amazing. The context here, which I think people need to understand, is that earlier in the campaign, Kamala Harris had criticized Joe Biden because, as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he had written the 1994 crime bill, which codified the harsh mandatory penalties for the first time nonviolent crime of possession of small amounts of drugs for personal use, which has been used disproportionately, I believe, to convict and incarcerate black people and poor people. This is I've written a lot about this. So the irony of Kamala Harris criticizing Joe for that, when in fact her record as a prosecutor in California, showed her essentially carrying out that same legal philosophy. Extraordinarily hypocritical, in my view.
And the hypocrisy continues, Roger. I couldn't agree with you more. She is someone who says one thing and holds herself to one standard and holds other people to a different standard and makes her decisions based on what's going to get her some extra political points, which is why, again, when we look to the choice before us in this upcoming election, we all have to recognize that a vote for President Biden is a vote for a President Kamala Harris. It's just a matter of time, and how dangerous she would be if allowed to be in that position as president and commander-in-chief. You look at what she did when she had that opportunity to bring about positive change in a high-level position for the state of California. Imagine what she would do as president and commander-in-chief with the most powerful military at her fingertips. How would she try to project her so-called strength to cover up her own insecurity and weakness? This is something I've warned the American people about for many, many years, including when I was still a Democrat serving in Congress, because it's real to me as not only an American, but as a soldier, a veteran, someone who continues to serve our country in uniform in the Army Reserve. It is, and this view is not something that is isolated to me. I can't even tell you how many of my friends that I serve with who share this same view, and those who serve in some of the most elite units within our country's military. So we've got to understand the seriousness on so many levels of this upcoming election, which is why, Roger, as you know, I just got off a plane, and I'll be on another plane in a couple of days. I'm committed to spending every day and every effort possible between now and Election Day to warn the American people about the threats that the Biden-Harris administration poses, and why, even as we may disagree on one issue or another issue, or how we tackle immigration or how we tackle health care in this country, we must stand together as Americans who cherish peace, who cherish freedom, and do our part to remove from office those who have brought us to the brink of World War III and nuclear war, and who are undermining our fundamental rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution.
We have just a few more minutes before our commercial break, and then we're going to come back and finish with you. We'll talk a little politics, but a quick question, and that is your views on whether we should continue funding the war in Ukraine.
We should not. And the reason is more and more people are being killed. The longer the U.S. continues to shoulder the vast majority of the funding for this proxy war against Russia, as well as the fact that we are continuing to undermine our own national security interests by heightening tensions with a country in Russia that has more nuclear weapons than any other country in the world, the United States included. Putin has recently talked about and has scheduled tactical nuclear weapons drills and has made very clear that his use of nuclear weapons is not off the table. If he faces an existential threat, he will not hesitate to use those, sparking off a nuclear war that could very likely end in nuclear Armageddon, not just for us, but for the world. What should have happened, and this has been my consistent position from before this war kicking off, and certainly after it did, there needs to be a negotiated end to this war. Parties involved need to come to the table, and the President of the United States should have been the one, and should still be the one, to exercise our leverage to make that happen. Their failure to do so, and the Biden administration's actively blocking other countries attempting to bring about peace between Russia and Ukraine, to me is unconscionable, and something that we as Americans should hold him and Biden and his administration to account for.
Very, very well put. Once again, folks, if you're just tuning in, I'm talking to Tulsi Gabbard, former Democrat member of Congress, now an independent. She's out with an incredible new book, For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. It is now number 4 on the New York Times best-selling list. as I mentioned earlier, sold out at the local bookstore here. I really think the book is doing extraordinarily well. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back with Tulsi Gabbard to wrap it up and maybe talk a little politics. So don't touch that dial, folks. We're going to be right back with Tulsi Gabbard.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks, on this special Memorial Day edition of the Roger Stone Show. We are privileged to have with us former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, now an independent. She's the author of a hot new book, For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. And now we come down to the inevitable discussion of politics. Tulsi, you have said in a number of interviews that if you were called upon, you would be willing to serve as a vice presidential candidate for President Donald Trump, whose views at this time, I think, more closely align with yours. I find that idea very intriguing. I've talked about it quite a bit on my own shows, as well as a number of other shows. It's a long odyssey from running as a Democrat for president to being considered to be vice president. Give us some insight into your thinking.
Roger, I've dedicated my entire adult life to serving our country. That is my goal and that is my mission. We've got an opportunity here now, given all of the things that we've talked about, the threats that we face, the frustrations that so many Americans have on everything, whether it's border security to the continued inflation in our economy, to the problems with our education system, to the challenges we face in our foreign policy with multiple wars either being waged or bubbling up in different regions of the world. This opportunity comes for us as Americans to be able to unite around our fundamental principles enshrined in the Constitution. I'm reaching out to all of those who feel politically homeless, who don't quite know what to do, to encourage them to join us in defending freedom, to join us in this cause of saving our country. If I have the opportunity to serve our country as President Trump's vice president or as his running mate, I would look forward to being able to bring about that change, to bring about that healing of the divide, to save our democracy and to protect our country from facing the precipice or standing on the precipice of nuclear Armageddon.
Well, as President Richard Nixon once said to me, nobody runs for vice president. It is unseemly. I think you have handled yourself very, very well by making your availability known, but not openly campaigning for the job. I think it would bind up the country. It would be a national unity ticket. I like the idea. There are other candidates who I admire as well, potential candidates, but I think the idea from a political point of view is extraordinarily intriguing. The number of undecideds is very small. I think this is going to be a very close election. I think President Trump has to continue to make inroads into some key Democratic voting groups by tradition. That seems to be happening among African Americans, among Hispanic Americans, and so on. Frankly, we could do better among women voters. I think that's another thing that you obviously bring to the ticket. So let me thank you for joining us today, this very Memorial Day edition of the Roger Stone Show. Folks, once again, this great book, For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. You can grab it anywhere that books are sold. My very special thanks to Tulsi Gabbard for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's great to speak with you. Aloha.